in the MCAT CARS podcast, session number 44. The CARS section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT CARS podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, and as always, I'm joined by the one and only Jack Westin from jackwestin.com. We have a great passage for you today, hopefully one that you will find interesting, all about a mogul in the meatpacking industry. Jack Westin back for some more MCAT CARS podcast. How are you today?
Good. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going. I'm excited as we're recording this. Summer is winding down. Students are getting interview invites. We're getting messages from students about crushing the CARS section because of this podcast. So things are going well. I'm excited.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome. I'm so happy to see students using our resources and improving. That's why we do what we do.
You got it. So what do we have in store for us today?
This is a very interesting passage. It's very straightforward, but you could easily get lost in the details. So it's a story, right? It's kind of establishing the arguments or the ideas in a very story-like fashion. And I find that students don't like these kinds of passages because they don't know what's important and what's not important. I always get students that tell me, "Hey, Jack, I read this paragraph or I read this passage and I just read the story and I don't know what do I need to get out of it?" And because there's so much going on, right? So I'm going to hopefully help explain what is important, what's not, by breaking it down with you. But another big part of this passage that I think is important is the fact that it doesn't really matter if you find all the major points, right? As long as you can follow through with what's going on and you have a bigger understanding of what is going on, you should be okay. So, but we'll go through both angles here.
Okay. I'm interested to see. So if you want to follow along, go to our show notes or click, if you're on an app on your phone, just swipe or tap on the artwork and usually that'll take you to the link where you can follow along. All right, paragraph 1. The meatpacking mogul Jonathan Ogden Armour could not abide socialist agitators. All right, so right away, meatpacking mogul and a name. And I'm already a little confused. Could not abide socialist agitators. So I don't really know what that means at this point.
This is very confusing for many students, right? But what do you know about Jonathan Armour? Who is Jonathan Armour?
He's a meatpacking mogul.
What does that mean?
He's like the meat packer. I don't know what that means. He does packing meats, so I'm assuming like beef is what I think of when I hear meat packing.
Right, and the key word is that word mogul, right? So what does mogul mean? What is
He's
a
like
mogul?
A business, big, successful businessman.
Yeah, tycoon, a boss, right? So that is something most students overlook, right? They just overlook the fact that this person has some kind of authority, right? Some kind of power, and they get lost in the whole abide socialist agitators. You don't need to know every aspect of this sentence, but you need to know who they're talking about and go with that. So right now, all we know is Jonathan Armour is some kind of meatpacking boss. He's like the Ryan Gray of meatpacking.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead. Keep going.
All right. It was 1906, and Upton Sinclair had just published The Jungle, an explosive novel revealing the grim underside of the American meatpacking industry. All right, so we're given another name here, an author who published, looks like an expose, an explosive novel revealing the dark side of the meatpacking industry.
Okay, sounds good. So we have a better idea of what's going on there. You may not know who Upton Sinclair is. Not a big deal. They're explaining it to you. They're educating you on what's happening, right? So there are some issues with meatpacking. Go figure. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
It's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, we're 100 years later than 1906, and we still have people trying to reveal the dark side of the meatpacking industry.
Yeah, you remember that YouTube video everyone was watching about meatpacking? I mean, it's crazy because you're right. It's still happening.
Yep. All right. Sinclair's book told the tale of an immigrant family's toil in Chicago's slaughterhouses, tracing the family's physical, financial, and emotional collapse. So Sinclair, again, this author of the book, looks like the story centers around an immigrant's family's experience in a slaughterhouse and how that affected them.
Was it a good experience or a bad experience?
A bad experience. Toil, if you don't know, toil is more of a negative word.
Yeah, and also the whole emotional collapse. I mean, that's really bad. So we could start forming what's going on, even though we don't exactly know what abide socialist agitators means, right? Probably some book that came out, and this boss, Jonathan Armour, is trying to, settle it down, right? And make it calmer, right? Because maybe this book is bringing up some kind of negative resentment towards meatpacking. Okay, go ahead.
The jungle was not Armour's only concern. All right, so Armour, again, going back to the mogul, it's saying that apparently this book, The Jungle, wasn't the only thing that Armour had to be concerned about.
Okay.
Coming for his business, maybe. I don't know. All right, next sentence. The year before, the journalist Charles Edward Russell's book, The Greatest Trust in the World, had detailed the greed and exploitation of a packing industry that came to the American dining table 3 times a day and extorts its tribute. All right, so another book, another author, again, just detailing how potentially bad, I guess, the meatpacking industry is.
Yeah, you don't need to know what 3 times a day and extorts its tribute means, but it's essentially saying that you have meat 3 times a day, right? And you're kind of hurting the meatpacking industry in some way, right? Or cows in some way, or whatever it is. So yeah, so good. So we have these 2 books, and apparently they're going against meatpacking. And we have this mogul, this, tycoon boss, whoever you want to call him, is trying to resolve this conflict, resolve this problem, right? Or at least try to settle it down. Okay. So any questions about that paragraph, Ryan, before we go into the next paragraph?
No, it's interesting that it's like you could have removed the 1906 from the paragraph and put 2006 and it'd be the same.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Exactly. And I like how you're finding some interest in what you're reading. Very important. A lot of students don't do that. They go in like a robot, like, oh, what's important? It's like a math equation. No, you're having a conversation with the author, right? And if you're too focused on finding things, you're going to miss out on the way the author presents the picture, right? So far, the author is positive, negative, or neutral towards all this.
I would guess that the author at this point is neutral. I don't hear any specific words, I don't think, or I haven't read anything specific other than just what the other authors are saying.
Exactly. A lot of students confuse the author's position with the author's presentation of other authors' positions, right? So the author never said this is bad. The author never said this is good. The author is just explaining what's happening. We have Jonathan Armour, and then we have these 2 authors who are talking negatively about his business ventures, right? So we don't really know where the author stands. Just because the author is presenting these negative points of views does not necessarily mean that they're siding with them, right? They may. We will soon find out. But for now, it's establishing what's going on. So just have an open mind while you're reading this. Take in things from different perspectives, and you should be okay. Go ahead.
All right, next paragraph. In response to these attacks, Armour, head of the enormous Chicago-based meatpacking firm Armour and Company, took to the Saturday Evening Post to defend himself and his industry. All right, so now we just have Armour fighting back.
Yeah, sounds good. Makes sense, right? With what's going on. Okay.
Where critics saw filth, corruption, and exploitation, Armour saw cleanliness, fairness, and efficiency. So Armour is contradicting everything that was kind of talked about in the previous paragraph.
Yeah, why wouldn't he, right?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
If it were not for the, quote, the professional agitators of the country, end quote, he claimed, the nation would be free to enjoy an abundance of delicious and affordable meat. And so now Armour is saying, hey, these professional agitators, I'm assuming he's talking about the authors, if it wasn't for them, then we'd have more meat that everyone could afford and eat.
Wow. So he's actually complaining that these people that are criticizing him or his business is actually hurting the business altogether.
Hurting
right?
people, right? Because the nation would be free to enjoy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, good. Okay. So this is all about his rebuttal, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. Keep reading.
All right, next paragraph. Armour and his critics could agree on this much. They lived in a world unimaginable 50 years before. So now the author is taking a little twist and showing us potentially how times have changed in 50 years.
Right, and what they agree on, right? So not what they disagree on, but what they agree on, okay?
In 1860, most cattle lived, died, and were consumed within a few hundred miles radius. All right, so again, just 50 years before, 1960, talking about how meat growth and consumption were handled.
We do not need to write this stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
This is just something that is establishing what they agree on. So it's building context for what they agree on. So we'll need to keep reading to understand this better. Go ahead.
Okay. By 1906, an animal could be born in Texas, slaughtered in Chicago, and eaten in New York. So again, just showing the path of meat production in America now, or in 1906.
That's pretty incredible, right? That's like over 100 years ago, and they could do this. Okay.
Yeah. Now they go between countries for different tax purposes. I was listening to a podcast recently. They were talking about how they ship them across the border for tax purposes. It's crazy.
Nice.
Americans, rich and poor, could expect to eat beef for dinner. So just showing the impact on this new growth. The key aspects of modern beef production, highly centralized, meatpacker dominated, and low cost, were all pioneered during that period. All right, so this paragraph is just kind of highlighting all of the changes that happened over 50 years where meat is being grown and packaged and eaten, etc.
Good. It is really the technological or whatever advancements that they're making, right?
Mm.
And at least they agree on it, right? And then the whole agreement is not really the point of view. The point of view that the author really wants you to know is they changed. There's a lot that happened, and it's different than it was before. Okay, go ahead.
Next paragraph. For Armour, cheap beef and a thriving centralized meatpacking industry were the consequence of emerging technologies such as the railroad and refrigeration, coupled with the business acumen of a set of honest and hardworking men like his father, Philip Danforth Armour. All right, so the author is just pointing out kind of how all of this happened. So we had the railroad, we had refrigeration, and we had Armour's father, Philip Armour.
Okay.
According to critics, however, a capitalist cabal was exploiting technological change and government corruption to bankrupt traditional butchers, sell diseased meat, and impoverish the worker. So just kind of, again, it seems like this this passage is just opposites, right? The first paragraph, we have the meatpacking industry is corrupt or like dirty. The second paragraph, Armour saying, no, it's clean. This one again is this paragraph is like, oh, look at the technology that's happening. And we have a hardworking man. And here's the opposite of, no, it was corruption and selling diseased meat.
Excellent. Yeah, you've noticed the competing themes, right? So which side is correct, which side is wrong? We don't really know yet, but it has been a back and forth, definitely. Okay, good. So that is what I want students to focus on. I want students to realize that what matters is not the actual details on the specific technological changes like refrigeration and railroads. That's great. That's important for the context of what they're trying to suggest, right? Which is whether meatpacking industry is a good thing or a bad thing, right? It's headed in the right direction or in the wrong direction. That's what's important to the author. So we don't really know which side the author is on right now, but at least we know the arguments of the passage. Okay, go ahead.
All right, next paragraph. Ultimately, both views were correct. All right, now we have the author's point of view here. Both views are correct.
Okay.
The national market for fresh beef was the culmination of a technological revolution, but it was also the result of collusion and predatory pricing. All right, so we have technology and corruption kind of going hand in hand. The industrial slaughterhouse was a triumph of human ingenuity as well as a site of brutal labor exploitation. So the author then painting a picture of what that slaughterhouse is. It's human ingenuity and labor exploitation. All right,
Okay.
Again, both sides of it.
Great.
Industrial beef production, with all its troubling costs and undeniable benefits, reflected seemingly contradictory realities. All right, look at that. That last sentence points out what I just said a minute ago. All right.
Excellent.
So
great. So what's the point of this passage? What is the author really trying to convey here?
The author is conveying that we can look at our beef industry and go, it's the result of good things and the result of bad things.
Great. So usually there's a dichotomy, right? And there is definitely a dichotomy here. There's two sides, and the author usually picks one side, right? But this is interesting because in this kind of dichotomy, in this kind of competing theme, the author agrees with both sides, right? So the author was saying these things not because they were necessarily in competition with one another, even though they are, but the author agrees with both sides ultimately. So you need to know, okay, the meatpacking industry changed. It got better, right? It did improve, right? To some extent, what Armour is suggesting is correct. But it also was an exploitation, right? It was also this bad thing, right? So bad things did happen in as a result of this technological improvement. So you need to know both sides. You need to know that the author believes both. But the author's tone has been very neutral throughout.
Yep.
The author never said that one side is worse than the other, or did not bring up their direct passionate opinion about one side. So we just need to know the points, but we don't necessarily have any kind of opinion or tone associated to these arguments.
Yeah.
To these ideas. Great. Okay. So we have a question. You ready to go?
Yeah. Go ahead and read the question.
All right. So according to the passage, what made meat widely available to most Americans? Okay. So I'll read out the answer choices and then you can kind of break it down.
Okay.
A, mechanical inventions and labor management techniques. Okay, so that's more about technology. B, best-selling books that popularized the industry's practices. So this is about books that could help popularize what the industry is doing.
Yep.
C, an increased supply of available sources of meat products, so more meat. Okay. D, compromises made between workers and industrial bosses. So some kind of business relationship between the employer and the employee. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You want to try to go through these?
Yeah. So B right off the bat for me is out the window, best-selling books. And they did talk about a couple books, but they didn't talk about if they were best-selling, and they didn't really talk about if the books popularized the industry's practices. They talked more negatively about shining a light on the bad stuff. So I would throw out B right away. C, an increased supply of available sources of meat products. They didn't really talk about an increased supply of meat products other than, I don't know. So C is a little weird for me because if I try to read it, I'm like, well, if you think about the technology and the corruption side of things, did that increase the supply? And is that why meat was more widely available? Is that how they're referring to like an increased supply of available sources. So C is on the edge for me. D for me doesn't make sense. They didn't really talk about any sort of agreements between workers and bosses and stuff, only the kind of corruption stuff. So I'm between A and C, and A for me. So mechanical inventions, sure. We had the railroad, we had refrigeration that they talked about. I guess we can call that mechanical inventions. The slaughterhouse, whatever was happening there, I'm sure there were some inventions. And then labor management techniques. I think a lot of students will read that and go, well, they talked about taking advantage of all of these workers. And is that a labor management technique? Sure, it's putting a pretty fresh coat of paint on it, but that is what it is, even if it's not very nice. So I would lean more towards A, although C is really making me mad if that's the right answer.
All right, so every student can pretty much eliminate two answers if they read the passage properly. If they didn't read the passage properly and they didn't read the first paragraph well, they're going to be guessing out of four answers. That's just what it is. Yeah, but if you read the passage properly, you know the big picture, you should be able to eliminate two answers, which you did successfully. B and D are definitely not relevant to what the author is trying to suggest. B is a trick because we know you read best-selling somewhere in the passage, right? And especially in the first paragraph. And usually students cling on to what they first read. So B is a trick, is a trap. The MCAT does this. We do this in our passages. We're very considerate of what the MCAT does, how they trick students. So we try to implement that in our questions. So B and D are definitely wrong. You may suggest that workers and industrial bosses were discussed. They were, but never their relationship really, right? Now, you may be thinking, well, weren't they exploited? Yes, but that's not going to answer the question. The question is about what made meat widely available, not their relation, not some kind of compromise. That doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't follow through with the passage at all. What made the meat more widely available? Is it the fact that they had better techniques and inventions, mechanical inventions, or was it that they had more supply? And we can easily eliminate C because we don't discuss there being more meat. We just discuss meat being more accessible, right? So C is out as well. But again, C is tempting because you'll look at it and go, well, maybe I can make a case for it. In the course, I teach students, don't make cases for things, right? Don't
talk yourself into an answer.
Don't talk yourself into it. Yeah. Be more pessimistic than optimistic about each answer choice.
Interesting.
And that's the kind of approach that I like to show students. It's really the way you approach questions depends a lot on how you read, but it also depends on your mindset. Which is what I'm trying to establish with students is try to read the way the test writers would read. Try to answer questions the way they would answer questions.
Be a pessimist. That's what you're saying.
Be critical. Be critical, right? That's why they call it critical analysis, right? And these reasoning skills. So that's what you're doing when you're reading. So yes, in this case, a lot of students will not like labor management techniques because they'll try to figure out why, where was that discussed? And I don't like fishing for things. I think fishing for things is not the way to go. The way to go is use your brain. Try to eliminate things, right? Try to use your brain in the right way, not in this hard labyrinth kind of remembering way. Okay.
Yeah. And when you say fishing for things, what do you mean? Like fishing back through the passages to see if you can find the answer?
That's most students think, oh, I'm going to find the right answer. You don't need to find the right answer.
Yeah.
It's all about reasoning why it's the best answer out of the other ones that are available. So yeah, they're trying to justify it as if, there's some kind of attorney or lawyer where they need to know exact details of the article, right? You don't need that. It's not necessary. It's a time test. You don't have that luxury on the exam. So that's how I would explain it to students. Now, in the course, I really detail the exact things that the MCAT does. like to the nail, right? To
Mhm.
like to the dot, essentially. So, you know, I really want students to think like the test taker, the test maker. Excuse me. And this is one way of doing it. So great job.
All right, so there you have it. The meatpacking mogul, Jonathan Ogden Armour. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Hopefully that was interesting. As always, remember, as Jack mentions over and over and over again, find interest in these passages and you will do better. Fight the passage and you will do worse. So hopefully you found some interest in this passage today, and hopefully going through this passage and going paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, has really helped improve your understanding of how to break down these passages, not only for the car section, but the other sections as well. If you are looking for some more help with your MCAT cars and you need potentially some more really in-depth help, go to jackwestin.com and check out how he can help you. If you click on services, he has the MCAT cars strategy course. And if you sign up for that course, let them know that you heard about him and the course here on the podcast from Ryan Gray. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you subscribe to get every episode for free every week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT Cars podcast.
This is MedEd Media.